from Claudia. Claudia, who is the senior researcher at Salzburg Research, and she's the project coordinator of the DyMoN project. And then we have two perspectives. Martin's perspective, which is the perspective of a geographer. Martin is a researcher at the University of Salzburg, but is also the head of the mobility lab in University of Salzburg. And then Claudia will come with the perspective of a psychologist. As you realize, this webinar will be recorded because we want to have it for our documentation of the project. So those of you who would like to be excluded of this, please let us know. I will not mention much more about this project, and I would like to leave it on to Claudia. Claudia, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Harris. Yeah, welcome also from my side. My name is Claudia Luger-Batzinger, as Harris so kindly introduced me. I'm a psychologist at Salzburg Research and a senior researcher, and I'm also the project coordinator for this DyMoN project, for our project here. And I have the honor to give a short introduction to the project. And as you see on the screen already, many cities face this challenge. People relying heavily on individual car use. And many of us are trying to answer the question, how do we get from this scenario to, click please, thank you, this scenario on the right-hand side. So less reliance on individual car use, but more use of more sustainable forms of transport, such as walking, bicycling, public transport, and so on. And this is not only a question of a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions or CO2 emissions, but this is also a question of quality of life within cities. Less car use means better air quality, less noise, and more room for people instead of cars. And in our project, we try to answer this question at least a little bit, make one step from the left side to the right side. And in this project, we bring together very different disciplines that not necessarily always work together. Thank you. So within the DyMoN project, we bring together geography, geoinformatics, software development, and information technology. And they meet psychology, behavioral insights, the social sciences, and innovation. And within this very interdisciplinary project, we try to motivate people to choose more the right side of this picture, more sustainable forms of mobility. And on the next slide, there is a short introduction to the project itself. So when we go a little bit deeper into the topic, we all know that for sustainable mobility, so-called hard measures or hard interventions only go so far. So by hard measures or hard interventions, I mean regulations, laws, bans, or new infrastructure. And they can be quite costly. Of course, when you think of infrastructure, they are not always possible, and sometimes they're not really effective. What we need, though, in support of these hard interventions are so-called soft measures, soft interventions, because really we need people to be motivated to use more sustainable forms of mobility. We need to change culture around car use. We need to change social norms. So what we have been doing the last 2.5 years within our project is that we want to work on and offer digital database behavioral interventions to foster sustainable mobility. And we talk about these more in the latter part of this webinar and also in the upcoming webinars. We are also talking about nudging here. So we really want to take people along with us from the left picture to the right picture. And for this, as I said, we are following a very interdisciplinary approach. We bring together psychology, social sciences with geoinformatics, geography, and software development. And we have achieved a lot of insights within the last 2.5 years. And we want to share these results, these insights, and also our challenges of the project with you in this webinar series. So I realized this is a very short introduction to the project. We are basically about digital database behavioral interventions. There's a lot more to the story. And we will tell this story in this webinar and also in the upcoming webinars. And I can now hand over to my colleague, Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much for this nice overview and also for the introduction. Thanks for having me this afternoon. So I want to share a geographer's, this is my perspective on sustainable mobility. And before we dive into this topic, I think we should spell out what we mean by sustainable mobility. So what I commonly do if I want to get to know a term that is broadly used, such as mobility, is to empty my cache and ask Google image search for what they understand or what the users of Google understand under mobility. And as you can see on this slide, mobility, Google has a rather clear understanding of mobility. It is very technology-centered. It is about infrastructure, physical as well as digital infrastructure. It is about smart environments. It is about efficiency. We get a completely different perspective if we do the same search with an alternative search engine. This is DuckDuckGo, same setting. So I emptied my cache and simply typed in mobility in the image search. And what we get here is a image of mobility that is more about the activity of being mobile. It is about the capability of being mobile, and it is about, obviously, about devices if mobility is no longer guaranteed independently. To get a comprehensive understanding of mobility, we need to reconcile these two concepts. And this leads to the following definition of mobility that I want to share. And it is a simplified one. So when we're talking about mobility, we are talking about the ability and the opportunity to move in space. And just to categorize the further terminology, I want to mention traveling, which is the activity of moving. And this is manifested as a trip. And associated to a trip is the question of mode choice and route choice. And both are embedded in a multifaceted choice architecture that we will learn about in this webinar and in the subsequent webinar series. An individual trip, or many individual trips, sum up to the collective phenomenon of traffic. So just to spell out of what we are talking. And with this conceptual clarification, we turn to the second versatile term, that is sustainability. And for this, we go back to the Saxon mining region of the early 18th century. And there we meet Hans Carl von Carlowitz, who reflected on the rapid deforestation around ore processing facilities. You might recognize the deforested landscape on this historic image of Freiberg in Saxony. And it became clear for Carlowitz that if they cut all the trees, the industry is running out of their natural energy resources. So he wrote a scientific book on this problem and published it in 1713. And this was really the very first time that we ran into the term of sustainability, which is nachhaltig or nachhaltend in this ancient German version in a German language. So nachhaltig means sustainable. And so he learned that if they cut too much wood, the industry won't have any energy resources. And he argued for a sustainable use of the natural resources there and called it sustainability or Nachhaltigkeit. So what he did, and we rely on this concept since then, is to link the ecological and the economical aspect of sustainability. And this concept has been mainly applied in forestry and fishery since then, but saw an expansion in the second half of the 20th century, culminating in the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. I do not want to spend too much time on the sustainability discourse of the 20th century, but I can tell you that this is an interesting research you could do. So we jump now from the early 18th century to the early 21st century to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which were published in 2015. And most of you will be aware of these SDGs or even work in one of these areas. And you might notice that none of these SDGs directly deal with mobility or transport. But there is virtually no goal that could not be related to mobility and vice versa. So I want to illustrate this by showing the strong relation between the transport domain and mobility to the three pillars of sustainability. And with this, we can link it to any of the SDGs virtually. If we are leaving the realm of passenger mobility, where we in the DyMoN project focus, this chart shows the correlation between the economic wealth and freight transport. And of course, this dimension competes with the other two pillars of sustainability, namely the social impact of transport and the ecological one. But this is a different story. And I do not want to spend too much time on it. It chart just shows how tightly related the economic wealth or economic growth and, in this case, freight is. So let's turn to the second pillar, that is the social sustainability. And I won't read out this, and I think the slides are going to be provided to you anyway, but this is from a report by the International Labour Organization, ILO, that was published in 2003. And it demonstrates the huge importance of mobility for social participation, and with this, with well-being. And to take this one step further, this aspect of well-being and social participation is tightly related to public health. And with public health, we can unlock huge, again, economic impacts. So here we can link it back to the economical sustainability, but still, I want to be very clear on this, that there is also some sort of competition between the economic and social side, and also to the ecological side. So let's turn to the third pillar of sustainability. And I simply want to highlight the huge share of the CO2 emissions that are coming from the transport sectors, contributing to the overall CO2 emissions. In this case, it's data from Europe. So depending on the models, but we can say that at least a third of all CO2 emissions are coming from the transport sector. So obviously, mobility and the transport sector is very, very tightly related to ecological sustainability. And CO2 is just one of the measures that we need to have in mind. I would also like to refer to the consumption of space and natural habitats. I want to refer to noise emissions and other ecological aspects. But thus, it is no surprise that the European Union, in its mobility strategy, does not only refer to the enabling role of mobility, but also to the societal and economic costs of mobility. So here on the screen, you see the first 3 paragraphs of the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy by the European Commission and the Parliament. And it clearly states how important mobility is as an enabler for social and also economical wealth. But in the second paragraph, it refers to the costs that come along with at least the current state of mobility or the transport sector. And this is why they suggest in the third paragraph sustainable mobility as a way out of this. And when they are talking about sustainable mobility, they talk largely about decarbonized transport. And this is exactly the context of the DyMoN project. So we are not aiming particularly at banning cars or let people stay at home, but to use mobility as an enabler for social and economic growth, but considering the costs and thus promoting sustainable mobility in the sense that I tried to sketch out. So we can now bring together the concepts of mobility and sustainability, and this is where we talk about sustainable mobility. And for this, I borrow Hannah Butnitz's definition of sustainable mobility. And she states sustainable mobility refers to the provision of infrastructure, services, technologies, and information to enable access to goods and services. So here again, we have the aspect of enabling something and participation in activities. This is the social aspect in a manner that, like all other forms of sustainability, allows for the continuation of such access and participation across future generations. So I think this nicely brings together everything I have said so far. Mobility as an enabler, considering the costs and thus optimizing the transport system in a way that it is sustainable also for and available in this extent to future generations. And of course, again, if we consider the 3 pillars of sustainability, we have here the different aspects that we need to consider. And from this one slide, and also from what Claudia said in the introduction, we can learn that such a comprehensive approach to mobility requires a different paradigm as we know it from modern transport planning. Professor David Bannister from Oxford University nicely summarized the difference of these paradigms in his 2008 paper. And without going into detail, I just want to highlight how he broadens the perspective from only a transport or even more only a traffic focus to a way broader understanding of mobility. For instance, regarding streets not only as a road, but regarding streets as a space where you can have social interactions, having a function in itself that goes beyond only to bring vehicles from A to B in a most efficient way. So this is really interesting, particularly for those of you who are in the planning domain, to consider mobility as the way broader concept compared to the conventional approach in transport planning and traffic engineering. following the sustainable mobility paradigm as summarized by Professor Bannister, we can witness a shift also in all kinds of strategy papers, be it on the regional or national or transnational level. The most recent examples of these strategy papers draw from the ASI concept, where A stands for avoid, S for shift, and I for improve. So the priority here is to avoid travel. And this is the, and I will come to this in a minute, avoiding travel means that we need to kind of counteract the separation, the geographical separation of functions, and come to a more compact and mixed use, particularly in our cities, but also beyond. When it comes to the S, the shift, it is about a shift from motorized transport to more sustainable forms of transport. For short distances, this means a promotion of walking and cycling, and for longer distances, the combination of active mobility and public transport. And only if a trip cannot be avoided, if there is no opportunity to shift to sustainable modes, it is about to improve the efficiency in terms of energy consumption of vehicles and systems. So this is about clean fuels or e-cars and similar. Interestingly, for the past, let's say, 20 years or so, most of the effort and research went into the improvement of the efficiency of vehicles, and we witnessed leaps forward there. But now with an extended understanding of mobility, it is not only about improving existing systems, but really also consider it before you start improving something, considering the opportunity to avoid trips or to shift to more sustainable modes. For putting this ASI approach into practice, a wide range of instruments are available. And one might notice immediately that the time of silo thinking in the transport domain is over. Instead, mobility has to be regarded as a cross-domain topic in which every discipline has an important contribution. And since mobility is spatial by nature, because it is about moving from A to B in space, geographers play an important role in a comprehensive promotion of sustainable mobility. So I want to spend the rest of my time on the spatial aspects of sustainable mobility. The most fundamental spatial aspect in this context is obviously distance. The modern or modernistic planning paradigm that was manifested primarily after World War II aimed at separating functions, which increased distances and of course increased car dependency. And this is how we rebuilt most of our cities after World War II, with the functional separation of living, working, leisure and recreational areas. And by separating this, we increased distances with higher speed levels, higher travel efficiency. We could or were able to limit the time that we spent on the road, but we increased the distances. And this was only possible because of the car and the infrastructure that was built for the car or around the car. Currently, many policies support a reversal of this trend and promote compact neighborhoods. And this is the, as I said before, the prerequisite for the A in the ASI approach. So a lot of money goes into research and implementation projects on the 15-minute city. And depending on the mode you choose, you can really cover quite a large area if you have adequate infrastructure provided. So on the right side, you see my hometown. This is the town of Salzburg. And from the city center by bike with an average speed of only 15 kilometers per hour, you can nicely cover almost the entire city. So a 15-minute city is not necessarily a utopia, but can be established not only in large cities, but also in mid-sized and small cities, of course, but it requires a good and adequate, safe infrastructure. As I said, proximity and a good mix of functions is definitely not enough to unlock the potential of sustainable mobility. Thus, we need to ensure accessibility. And I want to illustrate this with an easy example. So this is an example for very, very high accessibility for motorized transport. But obviously, this kind of infrastructure is a huge barrier for any active mode, making it non-accessible for pedestrians and cyclists. In general, and this is the opposite of it, in general, we can say that accessibility is given if any road user can reach facilities of daily life in a safe and comfortable manner. By the way, kids are an excellent indicator species for this. Here you see a nice or rather sad example for the importance of accessibility. In the background, you see a really, really well-designed bicycle parking facility at the main station, but the cycle lane ends just before the facility. And with this, it is only, I think, 100 meters or 150 meters, but it is a major safety threat and thus a barrier for getting there, particularly if you want to go there with kids. So this is a brilliant example for a lack of accessibility. You do have the function where it should be, so a bicycle parking facility very close to the main station, but it is not that nicely connected to the network. However, there are many more examples for accessibility, and there are also some really good role models, such the example of Utrecht in the Netherlands. The key message here is that a shift to sustainable modes is only possible if we provide safe, welcoming, and connected infrastructure. And there are plenty of tools available that help with the detection of weak points in the network and with the planning of connected, adequate infrastructure, given that the political will does exist. For more on this, I want to refer to the numerous very good design principles that are available. So we certainly don't need to reinvent the wheel in this field. So far, we have dwelt on physical aspects of sustainable mobility, and of course, there are many more. So I haven't talked about services, I haven't talked about technology, I haven't talked about information-based interventions, and I haven't talked about the necessity of human-centered design. Some of these aspects will be dealt with in the second half of this webinar and in the subsequent series. For now, I want to conclude my part with the main take-home messages. First of all, we need to consider mobility or sustainable mobility as a system. And we should consider the sustainability discourse. We can learn a lot of it and link it to different mobility paradigms. The second take-home message is that it requires the involvement of different domain experts. And this can be quite heavy, I need to say. First of all, you need to find a common ground. You need to find a common language. And Claudia said that we have a lot of learnings in this project, and I can tell you that this is one. So talking as one with the background in planning and the digital technology domain to a psychologist on mobility can be rather difficult, but it is definitely rewarding. Once you have found this common ground, you can really come up with innovation. And this is not by drilling deeper in my domain, but in integrating knowledge across silos. And the last points I want to highlight the benefits of sustainable mobility that can be unlocked in multiple fields. So it is not only a question of, I don't know, fighting climate change or being from the Green Party. It is really about having a comprehensive understanding and benefiting in the social domain or societal domain, in the ecological domain, but also in the economic domain. And with this, I want to give the book back to Harris and Claudia.
Thank you very much for the very inspiring presentation, Martin. It's much appreciated. We do not have so much time, so we'll go directly to Claudia's presentation, and then in the end, we will have some questions. Claudia, the screen is yours.
Yes, thank you. I also want to draw your attention to the chat, where we try out with questions to find out a little bit more about you, about our participants. So I think there is one question already in the chat. So if you want to share your background with us, and I think there is a second question also coming up. And yes, thank you, Martin, for the great introduction to sustainable mobility, what it means, and the spatial geographer's perspective on it. And now I want to continue with my perspective from a different discipline, a psychologist's perspective on sustainable mobility. And if you ever spoken to a psychologist, you know, we are all about the experience of humans and about their behavior. And behavior is also really the key for sustainable mobility. So in the introduction of the project, I already introduced these two terms to you, hard measures and soft measures. And hard measures mean legislation, bans, regulation, also infrastructure. Martin already showed us how infrastructure can also be used to improve the possibility for sustainable mobility. And then on the other side, we have soft measures. So we are talking about changing behavior, behavioral interventions. Sometimes we call them nudges in a certain context. We also talk about individuals' personal capabilities, opportunities, and motivations. And I come to these terms in a second. But overall, these two sides really need to work together in order to create a behavior change on an individual level that is needed for sustainable mobility. Because we are, after all, even if we are talking about a system level, an aggregated level, it really boils down to individuals' decisions and individuals' behavior. And within the DyMoN project, we are about, not only, but we are about database digital behavioral interventions. So we try to motivate people. And this will come up more in the subsequent webinars. But we really wanted to have a good ground for building up these behavioral interventions. And for the DyMoN project, we transferred a model from public health to the mobility sector. this model is called the COM-B model, and it was published by Susan Mickey and her colleagues, as I said, originally from public health, where it is very well respected and well used. And this is not a model about health behavior, it is a model about human behavior in general. So how is human behavior generated? And the idea that the model proposes is that we have 3 different aspects that interact with each other to generate a specific behavior. So we have capability, and capability means an individual's capability, anything that is inside of a person. So this can mean physical capability. So am I able, for example, from a fitness level, to bicycle for 5 kilometers? It can also mean a psychological capability. Do I know how to read a bus schedule? Do I know how to find the best ticket for me? Then we have motivation. Motivation is, I think, from the terminology, more straightforward. We all have a picture of what motivation could be. Of course, it is very specific and highly individual. Motivation can mean different things for different people. And then we have opportunity. An opportunity is anything that is outside of a person. And as I was talking about capabilities, capabilities can be changed to a certain degree by an individual, for example, by learning new skills. Opportunity can be harder to change for an individual because it is the environment we live in. So opportunity could mean a physical environment. Are there even accessible public transport options in my neighborhood? It could mean, are there safe bicycle lanes that I can use? It can also mean a social environment. Am I in a friends group or in a culture where car use is very highly regarded? Do I have to take care of small children or elderly people? When it comes to my mobility choices, this will matter. So a specific behavior is only shown if a person is capable of that behavior, if a person is more motivated for this behavior than for any other behavior, and if the person has the right opportunity. And this is the model that we worked with in the DyMoN project. And to make it more specific, I brought an example with me. So the example behavior would be, I use my bicycle instead of a car for my daily commute. So this is the behavior we're looking at. And what kind of aspects are needed now in order to get to this behavior even? So first of all, I need to be able to ride a bicycle for short distances. So this could mean, or this means being able to do it from a physical perspective, and that I know how to ride a bicycle so that I have the skill set. Then motivation, as I said, is highly individual, can be very specific for people and very different. In this case, this person sees bicycling as part of the fitness routine. So more time spent on the bicycle means less time in the gym. So that's a motivation. And then opportunity could also mean different things. There are many different opportunities that arise. But for example, in my case, a better opportunity for me to ride my bicycle is when the weather is good than when it's raining. So, and if these 3 things come together, maybe then the behavior of using bicycle instead of car for commuting is more likely than any other commuting behavior. And within the DyMoN project, we are very much about the second part. So how do we motivate people? And also about the last part, opportunity. And opportunity can be also shown to people. It can be made more visible. And in the DyMoN project, we do this through data. So we model opportunities for people through data and show it to them. And you can learn more about this in the third webinar, where we dive deeper into the data perspective of DyMoN. One big strength about this model of behavior change, this COM-B model, is that it's not only about what facilitators are there for a certain behavior, but also what barriers do exist. And it helps to think about barriers to behavior in a very structured way. And this provides a realistic, holistic view on mobility behavior. It helps us to move away from just bicycling lanes, just infrastructure, just nudging, and then everything will be solved, because in reality, unfortunately, it's not that easy. We can build so-called behavioral interventions to help to remove some barriers to behavior. And the nature of these interventions really depend on the organization that is implementing them. For example, if you're a transport provider, you could reduce ticket prices. You could make tickets even free. So you could provide new opportunities for people to use bus services. In research projects, sometimes we do give out free bus tickets, but usually maybe we are targeting other things. So, for example, more awareness about climate change, so more about the motivational barriers that exist to behavior. And then again, for advocacy organizations or NGOs, maybe they do neither of the first two things, but they try a different perspective, a different intervention. Maybe they try to teach people how to even ride a bicycle to those people who haven't been able to do so before. So this would be targeting the capability aspect. And within the DyMoN project, we have published very recently a handbook on digital nudging for sustainable mobility. And this handbook is free for you to download. Please, someone from the team post the link into the chat so people can follow the link and check out the handbook there. And we will talk much more about the handbook in the next webinar in December. But what we are trying to do in the handbook is taking people through this idea of using a model of behavior change and building up behavioral interventions in a very structured way, and also the possibility to use data to enhance these interventions. And I brought one example with me. We developed for the handbook this step system that helps people to think about what they should really target with behavioral interventions, with mobility campaign, with initiatives within their city or community. So first off, we need to think about really what is the current problem. And the more specific we are in understanding the problem, the better. Then we should think about what should people do instead. People need to have an alternative. We need to know what we want to promote. Even if we want people to avoid travel, just doing nothing will not be a very good alternative. So we need to think about, okay, what is the alternative behavior? And then we need to think about who really is our target group, because of course that will be a big difference whether I'm thinking about high school students or employees in a big company. And then I come to the step where I really think about what barriers do people have when it comes to showing this alternative, this target behavior. Is this motivation? Is it opportunity? Is it capability? And here more information, maybe more data can really help. So I can maybe rely on already existing mobility surveys, I can have focus groups with a target group. I can send out a survey myself and so on. And then I can think about, when I have identified barriers, how can I implement a behavioral intervention in order to remove this barrier. And to make it more concrete, I brought an example. So let's say I have a problem, and the problem is that there is a traffic jam on a major street every morning when people travel to work. And I can make this even more specific. I can say, okay, between 8 and 9, it's especially bad, and it's really bad on a Monday morning. And what should people do instead? I say, okay, commuters should opt to use public transport or their bicycle for the commute multiple times a week. And I can make that more specific. I can say, okay, especially on Wednesday, I want everyone to take the bus, or on Friday, I want most people to take their bicycle, whatever. And then I have identified a target group. Okay, I want to start with the employees of the 3 biggest companies in this district. And then what are barriers? And let's say I have conducted a focus group, and I have identified that people really have very positive feelings connected to their personal vehicles. They think it's very time efficient to just drive their cars to work instead of riding their bicycle. So they think it's a great time saver for them. Okay, once I've identified that, then I can think about how could I remove this barrier in motivation? One way would be to reframe the time and cost that goes into driving a car versus commuting more sustainable. For example, as I said, bicycling can be seen as a part of a fitness routine. So I'm working on myself. I don't need to spend more time in the gym. Taking public transport, taking the bus, I can reframe as, okay, I have time to myself. Maybe I can get a head start on my emails. Maybe I can really listen to a podcast, or I can read my favorite book. And these interventions can be then implemented also in a digital way, for example, through a smartphone app where I try to reframe the time and cost for people. And we can talk about this more, and we will talk about this more in the next webinar. But I just want to offer this perspective from psychology, that what this model of behavior change and psychology really can offer is a very structured approach to identify barriers and offer solutions in order to optimize campaigns, initiatives that are already happening within communities and cities all over the world. And I think taking in psychology as well as other disciplines can help in making our efforts more worthwhile. So this is the cover of the handbook that I'm obviously very proud of. You can download it on the website, and we'll take you through a ride of through behavior change, behavioral interventions, and also how data can enhance these kind of interventions. And there's also inspiration, canvases, something for you to work on with. And we have 3 more webinars coming up. This webinar is, at least from the input side, coming to an end. And the next one is December 7th, where we talk more about this behavior change perspective. And this will be more interactive, or a lot more interactive, where we try to work on different things together with you. And I want to invite you at this point to the next webinar. And then we have one more in January and one more in February. January will take more the technology and data side. And then February will share our learnings, recommendations, also challenges that we face within the project. And if you have questions, we will make this slide set available online. There will also be the recording of the webinar. And there are all the links in there in case you're interested. And I think we have time to take a couple of questions. And I hand over to Harris now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudia. Very nice presentation. Appreciated. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to speak out loud. So you do not need to write on text. Feel free to present yourselves. Open up your cameras. We would like to see you as well. So feel free to ask Claudia and Martin anything you want. Before we go further to any questions, I would like to ask you, Claudia and Martin, one of the biggest challenges in this project is to break silos. And as Martin mentioned clearly, we managed to break silos in this project. And in the beginning, it seemed to be quite challenging, but this is one of the success factors of this project, that even early in the beginning, we managed to find a common language that everybody could communicate. And the geographer, for example, as you mentioned, could find a common stage with a psychologist. How did you manage that? How did you do that? Claudia?
Okay, I need Martin? To go first. Okay. Yeah. I think talking to each other a lot. And in the beginning, you think you're talking about the same things. And then as you go along, you find out, oh, okay, they are using the same terminology for a different thing than I thought it would be. So really having the patience for this discussion and being open for other ideas, and realizing that other people with other backgrounds might see things differently, even if I think that they mean exactly the same thing. Martin, what was your perspective?
Martin, what's your?
I don't know if I can contribute too much to this, because it is obviously about talking to each other. And I think it is also the expectation that someone from a different domain has something to share. And so I think sometimes there is some sort of domain arrogance. You think you have made it and you do not need anyone else, but expecting new perspectives or new even a completely different take on something can be really rewarding, but it is not a quick thing. So it is always faster to work with domain experts that have the same background as you have. But I think we came to a point not only in the political discussion, but also in academia and in the different application domains, where we reached some sort of limit within the domains. And I think that the next innovations in the transport sector will be made by linking things that have not been linked that closely yet.
Perfect. Thank you both. Yeah, it's not an easy process, but it seems that through the project we have managed to bring it into a good and certain good point. But it was not easy also in the beginning when we started working on this application. We needed to communicate with each other. We needed to understand. We needed to accept. These projects need to have diversity and understanding of each other's competences. It's something that we also believe. We believe in collective intelligence. Everybody's intelligent in a completely different way, and since one understands that, it's the only way forward. Claudia, in the chat, I see that the Bible is shared to the group, the handbook. You mentioned that you're very proud of it. We are all proud of it, that you have developed such a nice handbook together with the team. Martin is there as well. Mm-hmm. How do you want people to use this handbook? How, for example, we have a link here. It's a very interesting read. How one can use the handbook.
So I hope that the handbook is not from research for academia again, but something that can be also used by cities, by communities, by practitioners. So as I said in my presentation, this idea of soft measures is already out there and very well practiced. So there are a lot of mobility initiatives, campaign, and so on. And I think sometimes it would be better to go back a step and think about, okay, what does my specific city, my specific community really need? Where are the problems? And my hope is that this handbook helps a little bit along the way. Because I think what happens a lot is that there is the hope that there is a cookie cutter solution that can be applied to any city, any problem. And I am afraid that this is not the case. And taking time to really think about what is the problem and what can we provide to help people will make our efforts more worthwhile.
Perfect. Thank you, Claudia. Martin, it has been already 2.5 years in the project. The project is going to finish soon. We have the webinars. We have 3 webinars more. And then we have to communicate our results as well. Over the last 2.5 years, was there any memorable moment that it comes first in your mind?
I think the one thing that is driving us, and it has not necessarily started with this project, but it was boosted and we haven't finished yet, is how to bring together the necessary interventions in physical space. And I think one of the participants mentioned this in the in the chat. So infrastructure or providing adequate infrastructure is something like a backbone, and how it is related with these soft measures. And I learned a lot about psychology and behavioral economics, and I'm eager to link these two worlds, because I would also hypothesize that the physical space, the environment, affects the efficiency and effectivity of the nudges. So further investigating this would be really, or is awesome, and I will certainly go for this, and whoever is interested in this should join the party. But this was one of the, if you ask me about the highlights or something memorable, bringing together these two worlds, not only on a conceptual basis, but really doing the research, how they are related and how they are interdependent. We all know this from textbooks, that there are soft measures, there are hard measures. We know about this, but how are they really related, and how can they influence each other is something I'm triggered.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. We don't have so much more time, but if we don't have any questions from the public here, from the people here, I have a last one. We have 2 minutes more, and I would like Claudia to pitch in 30 seconds her role in the project. What do you do in the project, Claudia?
I'm the project coordinator, and I'm leading the psychology perspective in the project. Yeah, that was less than 30 seconds, right?
That's a good pitch. Martin, what is your role in the project?
Yeah, I'm leading the geographer's perspective, as it became obvious today. I hope so, at least. And I feel myself being a little bit the translator between the two worlds, and I hope to be able to link the data side and the technology and infrastructure side to the psychologists and behavioral economics part.
Perfect.
So serving as a translator, to be short.
Brilliant. Thank you very much both for the very nice presentations. And I would like to finish up with the last slide that Claudia mentioned or showed for the webinars. I have it here, so I can possibly share. So the next webinar, it is on 7th of December. Feel free to block your agendas. We will come with some information about the webinar. The next one is 11th of January. And then we have the 1st of February. So feel free to block your agendas already now. If you have any questions, you know where to find us. And at this moment, I would like to thank you all. Thank you very much again, Claudia and Martin. And we keep in touch. My greetings from Paris.
Thank you, Harris, for the moderation. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone.